A billionaire watched in silence as his maid's daughter was forced to return her brother's birthday cake at the counter. But when he stepped forward, his next move stunned everyone watching. $12.50. That was the precise cost of a little boy's entire world. Standing at the busy checkout, Emily counted her crumpled bills and realized the math wouldn't work. She was short. Under the impatient gaze of the cashier and the line behind her, she had to make a cruel choice. "I'm sorry. I thought I had enough," she said with quiet dignity, handing back the blue rocket ship cake her brother had dreamed of for months. She forced a smile to hide her crushing defeat, thinking her shame went unnoticed in the crowd, but she was wrong. Billionaire Robert Sullivan was watching from the shadows, and he was about to make a move that would change their lives forever. The price of the birthday cake was $12, but the cost of leaving it behind was heartbreaking. 12-year-old Emily stood frozen at the checkout counter, her small hand clutching a pile of crumpled bills that wasn't enough. She looked down at her little brother's hopeful face and felt the heavy weight of the world on her shoulders. The grocery store was busy for a Tuesday afternoon. People moved quickly, their carts full of food, their minds on dinner plans and work schedules. But for Emily, time seemed to slow down completely. She stared at the digital screen on the register. The red numbers did not change. $12.50. She looked down at her palm. She had carefully counted the money 3 times before they left the house. She had a $5 bill, 3 singles, and a handful of quarters and dimes she had saved from collecting recycling cans. In her head, it added up. In her head, it was enough. But now, staring at the cashier, Emily realized she had miscalculated. She was short. "Well?" the cashier asked. Her name tag said Brenda. She was a woman in her 50s who looked like she had been standing on her feet for too long. She tapped her fingernails against the counter. "Do you have the rest, honey? There is a line forming behind you." Emily felt her face grow hot. She could feel the eyes of the other customers burning into her back. She looked down at her brother, Timmy. He was 7 years old today. He was holding the edge of the counter, his eyes wide and fixed on the plastic container. Inside was a vanilla cake with blue frosting and a small sugar rocket ship in the center. Timmy had been talking about the rocket ship cake for 2 months. He didn't ask for toys. He didn't ask for a party. He just wanted the cake that looked like space. "I think I have another quarter," Emily said softly. Her voice was steady, even though her stomach was twisting in knots. She dug into the pocket of her worn denim jacket. Her fingers brushed against lint and a loose button, but no money. She checked her other pocket. Empty. "I'm sorry," Emily said, looking up at Brenda. "I thought I had enough. Can we take off the candles?" Brenda sighed. It was a loud, heavy sound that made Emily shrink a little inside. "The candles are only $2. The cake is $10.50. You have $9 here." The math was simple. It was cruel, but it was simple. "Oh," Emily whispered. Timmy tugged on her sleeve. "Em? What's wrong? Can we go eat the rocket now?" Emily turned to him. She forced a smile onto her face. It was the same brave face her grandfather used to make in the old photographs on their mantel. "Hey, Timmy, you know what? I think I saw a better cake at home. A surprise cake." Timmy frowned, confused. "But I like this one. You promised." "I know," Emily said, kneeling down so she was eye level with him. She ignored the impatient shuffling of feet behind her. "But plans change, soldier. Remember what Grandpa used to say? A good soldier adapts." Timmy straightened his posture slightly at the mention of Grandpa. "Okay, I adapt." Emily stood up and looked at the cashier. She pushed the money back into her pocket with dignity. "We will not be taking the cake today. I apologize for the inconvenience." "Fine," Brenda muttered. She shoved the cake to the side, near the bag of returned items. "Next." Emily took Timmy's hand. She walked past the line of people. She kept her head high, staring straight ahead. She did not want anyone to see her eyes watering. She did not want their pity. She was a miller, and millers did not beg. Near the magazine rack, a man in a charcoal gray coat watched the entire scene. Robert Sullivan was 70 years old. He was a man who owned skyscrapers, shipping fleets, and more land than he could walk in a lifetime. He was known in the business world as a shark, a man of iron will. But today, he was just an old man buying a newspaper and a bottle of water. He stood perfectly still, his sharp blue eyes following the girl and the boy. He knew that girl. He didn't know her name, not exactly, but he knew her face. She was the daughter of Susan, one of the maids who cleaned his penthouse suite on Thursdays. Susan was a quiet woman, hard-working, always keeping her head down. Sometimes, during the summer or school holidays, she had to bring her daughter along. The girl would sit in the staff break room, reading thick books with torn covers, quiet as a mouse. But it wasn't just recognition that stopped Robert. It was something else. As the girl turned to leave, her jacket swung open slightly. Pinned to her faded t-shirt was a silver medal. It was old, tarnished, but unmistakable to a man like Robert. It was a silver star, Robert's breath caught in his throat. That was a medal for gallantry in action. A medal for heroes. He looked closely at the girl's face again. She had the same determined jawline, the same steel in her eyes that he had seen in men on the battlefield 50 years ago. He watched her walk out the automatic doors, her hand firmly gripping her brother's. She didn't look back at the cake. She didn't cry. She just marched forward. "Excuse me, sir? Are you buying that water?" Robert blinked, snapping back to reality. The cashier, Brenda, was looking at him now. "Yes," Robert said. His voice was deep and commanded attention without being loud. He stepped up to the counter. He placed the water and the newspaper down. Then he pointed to the side. "And I will take that cake, the one the little girl just left." Brenda looked surprised. "The rocket ship cake? You want that?" "Yes. And the candles," Robert added. "That will be $12.50 plus the water and paper," Brenda said, her tone suddenly much more polite. She sensed money on him. It was in the fabric of his coat, the way he held himself. Robert pulled a crisp $20 bill from his leather wallet. "Keep the change." He took the plastic container. He looked at the blue frosting and the little sugar rocket. It was a simple thing, a cheap thing. But to that boy, it was the whole world. And to that girl, leaving it behind was a defeat she did not deserve. Robert walked out of the store. The winter air was biting and cold. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun setting early behind the city skyline. He scanned the parking lot. He saw them. Emily and Timmy were walking along the sidewalk, near the edge of the lot. They were heading toward the bus stop, but then they walked past it. They were walking home. It was too cold to walk, but saving bus fare was likely part of their budget. Robert walked to his car, a black sedan that looked modest, but had an engine worth more than the grocery store. He placed the cake on the passenger seat carefully. He got in and started the engine. He didn't turn on the headlights yet. He just let the car idle, watching the two small figures trudging against the wind. He needed to know more. He needed to understand why the granddaughter of a war hero, someone who wore a silver star on her shirt, was counting pennies for a grocery store cake. And he needed to know why his own employee, Susan, was struggling this much. Robert put the car in drive. He pulled out of the lot, keeping a slow distance. He was going to follow them. "Is it far?" Timmy asked. His teeth were chattering slightly. The wind cut through his thin jacket. "Not far," Emily lied. "Just a few more blocks. Think warm thoughts, Timmy. Think about a volcano." "Lava is hot," Timmy said, tucking his chin into his scarf. "Exactly. We are walking on lava rocks. We have to move fast so our shoes don't melt." Emily squeezed his hand. She felt terrible. She had failed. Today was the one day Timmy was supposed to feel special. Their dad had left 3 years ago, just packed a bag and vanished. Their mom worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, scrubbing floors and cleaning toilets for rich people. And Grandpa. Grandpa had been their rock. But the cancer took him 6 months ago. The medical bills had eaten everything. The house, the savings, the car. Now they lived in a small apartment in the basement of a brick building that smelled like damp earth. Emily touched the metal on her chest beneath her jacket. It was heavy. Grandpa had given it to her before he died. "You're the captain now, Em," he had rasped. "You take care of the troops." Currently, the troops were freezing and cakeless. "Em?" Timmy looked up. "Did you really see a surprise cake at home? Or did you just say that because we didn't have money?" Emily's heart stopped. Timmy was smart. Too smart for 7. She looked down at him. She couldn't lie to him. Not about this. "We didn't have enough money, Timmy," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I tried to save, but the price went up." Timmy was quiet for a moment. He kicked a small stone on the sidewalk. "It's okay. I don't need cake. I'm 7. 7 is big. Big kids don't need frosting." His maturity broke her heart more than his tears would have. He was trying to protect her feelings. "We will have something," Emily promised, her voice fierce. "Mom is bringing home leftovers from the restaurant job tonight. Maybe she has pie." "Pie is good," Timmy agreed weakly. They turned the corner onto their street. It was darker here. The streetlights flickered, and some were broken completely. The houses were narrow and sat close together. A black car drove slowly past them. Emily tightened her grip on Timmy's hand. Grandpa taught her to always be aware of her surroundings. "Head on a swivel, Emily." The car didn't stop, but it moved slowly. It was shiny and clean, out of place on this street where most cars had rust and dented bumpers. She watched it turn the corner and disappear. "Come on," she said, walking faster. "Almost there." They reached their building. It was a 3-story brick structure with peeling paint. They lived in Unit B, the basement level. To get there, they had to walk down a small set of concrete stairs below the sidewalk level. Emily unlocked the door. The air inside was warmer than outside, but not by much. They kept the heat low to save on the electric bill. "Shoes off," Emily commanded gently. Timmy kicked off his sneakers. "Is Mom home?" "Not yet. She works until 7 at the big house. Then she has the shift at the diner until midnight. Remember?" "Oh, yeah." Timmy slumped onto the worn-out sofa. The living room was small. A rug covered the cracks in the linoleum floor. On the wall, framed prominently, was a folded American flag in a triangle case. Next to it was a photo of a man in uniform, smiling a rugged, handsome smile. Sergeant William Miller. Emily went to the small kitchenette. She opened the cupboard. A box of crackers, a can of tomato soup, and half a jar of peanut butter. "Okay," she said to herself. "Birthday dinner." She could make tomato soup and put crackers in it. It wasn't a party, but it was warm. She filled a pot with water and the soup concentrate. As she stirred, she felt the tears finally stinging her eyes. She wiped them away angrily. Crying didn't fix anything. Crying didn't buy cake. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was a firm, solid knock. Not the landlord, who pounded like he wanted to break the wood. Not the neighbor, who scratched lightly. Emily turned off the stove. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was too high for her, so she dragged a chair over. She climbed up and looked. Standing there, in the dim light of the hallway, was an older man in a gray coat. He was holding a white plastic grocery bag in one hand and a familiar plastic container in the other. It was the man from the store. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. Had she stolen something by accident? Was he the police? No, he didn't look like police. He looked rich. "Who is it?" Timmy whispered from the couch. "Shh," Emily hissed. "I know you are in there." The man's voice came through the door. It was deep and calm. "I am not here to harm you. I believe you forgot something at the store." Emily hesitated. Grandpa said never open the door for strangers. But this man had a voice that sounded like Grandpa's. It sounded like authority. She unlocked the deadbolt, but kept the chain on. She opened the door 2 inches. One blue eye peered out at him. "We didn't forget anything," Emily said firmly. "We just couldn't pay. I didn't steal." Robert Sullivan looked at the sliver of the girl's face. He saw the fear, but he also saw the defiance. "I know you didn't steal," Robert said. He lifted the cake container so she could see the blue frosting through the crack in the door. "But a soldier never leaves a man behind. And I believe this rocket ship belongs to your squad." Emily stared at the cake. Then she looked at the man's face. He wasn't smiling a fake smile. He looked serious. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Robert," he said. "I know your mother, Susan, and I knew the man whose medal you are wearing." Emily froze. She unhooked the chain. She opened the door slowly. Robert stood there, the hallway light casting a long shadow. He stepped forward, not aggressively, but with purpose. "May I come in?" he asked. "I have a delivery for a Mr. Timmy." Timmy jumped up from the couch, his eyes locking onto the plastic container. "The rocket!" Emily stood aside, her hand still gripping the door handle. She didn't know why, but she trusted him. Maybe it was the way he stood. Maybe it was because he recognized the medal. "Come in," she said. Robert stepped into the small basement apartment. He took in the sight instantly. The peeling paint, the clean but worn furniture, the smell of tomato soup on the stove, and there, on the wall, the flag. He walked over to the small table and placed the cake down. "Happy birthday, son," Robert said to Timmy. Timmy looked at Emily for permission. She nodded. Timmy ran to the table. "Wow, it's the real one! Look, Em, it's the real one!" Robert turned to Emily. The room was small, and his presence filled it. "You're Susan's daughter," he stated. "Yes, I'm Emily." "And that," Robert pointed to the photo on the wall, "is William Miller." "My grandfather," Emily said, her chin lifting slightly. "I served with the 101st Airborne," Robert said quietly. "Your grandfather was a legend in the Corps. They called him Iron Will." Emily's eyes widened. "You knew him?" "I knew of him. Everyone did." Robert looked around the poor apartment again. His jaw tightened. A man like William Miller should have left a legacy of security for his family. The fact that his grandchildren were living in a basement, counting pennies for a cake, made Robert feel a deep, burning anger. Not at them, but at the system, at the world, and perhaps at himself for not noticing sooner. "Does your mother know you are here?" Emily asked. "No," Robert said. "I saw you at the store. I followed you to make sure you got home safe. But now that I am here, we need to talk." "About what?" Emily asked, feeling defensive again. "About why the daughter of a hero is returning a birthday cake," Robert said, "and about how we are going to fix it." The kitchen table was a small, round piece of furniture with a laminate top that had peeled at the edges. Robert sat on a folding metal chair. It was cold against his back through his coat, but he did not move. He watched Timmy devour the slice of blue cake with a focus that only a 7-year-old could summon. "This is the best rocket ever," Timmy mumbled, his mouth blue. "Chew, Timmy. Don't inhale it," Emily said. She stood by the stove, stirring the soup. The smell of tomato and metallic tin filled the small room. It was a smell from Robert's childhood, a smell of lean times during the war, before the skyscrapers and the private jets. Robert turned his gaze to Emily. She was too young to have that worry line between her eyebrows. She moved around the kitchen with an efficiency that spoke of necessity, not choice. "You run a tight ship, Emily," Robert observed. Emily poured the thin red soup into 3 chipped bowls. She placed a stack of saltine crackers in the center of the table. "Someone has to. Mom is tired when she gets home. I try to have dinner ready." "Your mother works hard," Robert said. It was a statement, not a question. She works all the time, Timmy chimed in, licking frosting off his thumb. She scrubs the big floors at the tower. She says the floors are so shiny you can see your nose in them. Robert flinched slightly. The tower was his building, the Sullivan Plaza. He walked those floors every day. He never thought about the hands that made them shine. He never thought about the knees that knelt on the marble to polish it. She does a good job, Robert said, his voice thick. The floors are indeed very shiny. Emily placed a bowl of soup in front of Robert. It's not much, but it's hot. Robert looked at the soup. He wasn't hungry, and he knew that every spoonful he ate was a spoonful taken from their mouths. But to refuse would be an insult to her hospitality. In this house, offering food was a sacrifice. Rejecting it was a sin. Thank you, Robert said. He picked up the spoon. It looks delicious. He took a small sip. It was watery and needed salt, but he ate it with the same respect he would show a five-star meal in Paris. So, Robert said, wiping his mouth with a paper napkin, your grandfather, Iron Will, did he tell you stories about the war? Emily sat down next to Timmy. She didn't start eating immediately. She watched Timmy to make sure he had enough crackers. Sometimes. Mostly he talked about the men. He said the medals didn't matter. He said the only thing that mattered was the guy standing next to you. Robert nodded slowly. He was right. Will was the best of us. I remember one time near the Ardennes. We were pinned down, cold, colder than this room. We had no food for 2 days. Timmy stopped chewing. His eyes went wide. Did you eat bugs? Robert chuckled, a dry, rusty sound. No bugs, but we ate snow to stop the hunger pangs. Your grandfather found a tin of peaches in an abandoned farmhouse. Just one tin. There were 12 of us. What did he do? Emily asked. She was leaning forward now, the soup forgotten. He opened it, Robert said, his eyes distant. And he passed it around. Everyone got one slice. He made sure the youngest private ate first. He ate the syrup at the bottom. That was Will. He always fed the troops first. Robert looked pointedly at Emily. I see the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Emily looked down at her bowl. A faint blush colored her pale cheeks. I just wanted Timmy to have a birthday. And you succeeded, Robert said. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a notebook and a gold pen. Emily, I want to ask you a question, and I need a soldier's honest answer. No protecting the command. Understood? Emily straightened up. Yes, sir. How much is the rent for this place? Emily hesitated. She looked at the door as if expecting her mother to burst in and stop her. But the door remained closed. $600, she whispered. Robert wrote it down. And the utilities? Heat is electric. It's expensive. In the winter, maybe 200. We keep it off mostly. And food? Mom gives me $50 a week for groceries. I use coupons. Robert did the math in his head. It was brutal arithmetic. Susan's salary at the cleaning company, a company he contracted but didn't manage directly, was likely minimum wage. After taxes, she was probably bringing home barely enough to cover the rent. The rest was a juggling act. A dangerous, exhausting juggling act where one dropped ball meant disaster. Is there debt? Robert asked gently. Emily nodded. The hospital. Grandpa was sick for a long time. The ambulance rides. The medicine. Mom says we are paying it off, but the letters keep coming. They are printed in red ink. Red ink. The color of blood in the financial world. I see, Robert said. He closed the notebook. He didn't need to write anymore. He had seen enough. Suddenly, the lights in the apartment flickered. They buzzed angrily, dimmed to a dull orange, and then surged back to brightness. The wiring is bad, Emily explained casually. The landlord says he will fix it next month. He said that last month too. Robert's hand clenched around his pen. He owned buildings all over the city. If a light bulb flickered in one of his hotels, A maintenance crew was there in 5 minutes. Here, a widow and 2 children lived in a fire trap, and the landlord made empty promises. The sound of a heavy metal door scraping open echoed from the hallway. Then, the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of tired feet on concrete stairs. "Mom's home," Timmy shouted. He jumped off his chair, his face still smeared with blue frosting. Emily stood up quickly. She looked at Robert with a sudden panic. "Please," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't tell her I told you about the money. She has a lot of pride. She doesn't want anyone to know." "Your secret is safe with me," Robert promised. The door handle turned. The door opened. Susan Miller stepped inside. She was a woman in her late 30s, but fatigue had aged her. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands escaping to frame a face that was pale and drawn. She wore a thick, shapeless coat over her cleaning uniform. In her hand, she carried a plastic bag from the diner where she worked her second shift. "Hey, monkeys," she said, forcing a bright, cheerful tone that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I brought pie." She lifted the bag. Then she froze. She saw the boots first. Expensive leather boots, polished to a shine. Then the gray trousers. Then the charcoal coat. Her eyes traveled up to Robert's face. The bag of pie slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. Mr. Sullivan?" Susan gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. The color drained from her face completely. "Oh my God. Is something wrong? Did I forget to lock the executive suite? I swear I checked the doors. I swear." She was trembling. It was a reaction of pure fear. Fear of losing her job. Fear of the man who held her livelihood in his hands. Robert stood up. He felt a sharp pang of guilt in his chest. He didn't want to be the monster in her story. "Susan," he said, his voice gentle and low. "You are not in trouble. The suite is fine. Everything is fine." Susan looked confused. She looked from Robert to Emily, then to Timmy and the blue cake on the table. "Then, what are you doing in my house?" she asked. She took a step back, as if she were the intruder. "How did you find us?" "I brought the cake," Timmy announced proudly. "Well, he brought it, but it's for me." Susan looked at the cake, the expensive bakery container, the rocket ship. She looked back at Robert, her eyes narrowing slightly. The fear was being replaced by a defensive wall. "You bought my son a cake?" Susan asked slowly. "I ran into your children at the grocery store," Robert said. He chose his words carefully. "There was a complication with the checkout. I simply assisted a neighbor." "A neighbor," Susan repeated, bitter irony in her voice. "You live in the penthouse, Mr. Sullivan. We live in the basement. We are not neighbors." "Mom, he knows Grandpa," Emily interjected, stepping between them. "He served with him. In the 101st. Susan paused. She looked at Robert with new eyes. She saw the way he stood, the military bearing that age hadn't erased. She looked at the photo of her father on the wall, then back at the billionaire. "You knew my father?" she asked softly. "I did," Robert said. "He was a good man, a brave man." Susan let out a long, shuddering breath. She leaned against the doorframe, her energy suddenly gone. He was. He was stubborn, though, would never take a handout. She looked at the cake again. "Mr. Sullivan, I appreciate the gesture. Truly. But I can pay for my own family. I don't need charity from my boss. I will pay you back for the cake on Monday. You can deduct it from my wages." "Susan," Robert started. "Please," she interrupted, her voice rising. "I work 2 jobs. I take care of my kids. We are fine. We don't need you coming down here to inspect us." "I am not inspecting you," Robert said firmly. "I am visiting, and I am seeing things that concern me. Not as your boss, but as a human being." He gestured to the room, the peeling paint, the dark corners. "You are working 16 hours a day, Susan. I checked your logs. And you are coming home to this? Why didn't you come to HR? Why didn't you say you were drowning? HR? Susan laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Mr. Sullivan, the last time I asked for a shift change to take Timmy to the doctor, my supervisor told me there were 10 people waiting for my job. If I complain, I'm gone. If I say I'm struggling, I'm a liability. Robert went silent. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He sat in his boardroom, looking at spreadsheets of profits and efficiency. He didn't see the fear culture that his middle managers had created. He didn't see the threat that hung over people like Susan. "That supervisor," Robert said, his voice turning cold as ice, "will be dealt with." Susan's eyes widened in panic again. "No, please, don't say anything. If you make a scene, they will take it out on me when you leave. Please, Mr. Sullivan, just go. Thank you for the cake. Thank you for being kind to Timmy. But please leave us alone." She bent down and picked up the bag of pie. She walked to the counter and set it down, her back to him. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying, silently, trying to hide it from her children. Emily looked at Robert. Her eyes were pleading. "Do something," they said. Robert looked at the woman's back. He looked at the conditions of the room. He realized that simply writing a check wouldn't fix this. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. It was about a broken system that punished the hardworking. He couldn't just leave. If he walked out that door now, nothing would change. Monday would come, and Susan would be back on her knees scrubbing his floors, terrified of losing her pittance. "I cannot leave," Robert said. Susan turned around, wiping her eyes. "Excuse me?" "I cannot leave you here," Robert clarified. "Not tonight. The wiring in this building is a fire hazard. I saw the lights flicker. I smelled the ozone. It is not safe." "It's all we have," Susan said defensively. "It is not all you have available," Robert corrected. "Pack a bag." "What?" "Pack a bag for yourself and the children, just the essentials for tonight." "Where are we going?" Timmy asked, excitement bubbling in his voice. "I am not going anywhere with you," Susan said, crossing her arms. "I don't know what you think this is, but I am not some charity case you can just scoop up." "It is not charity," Robert snapped. His patience was fraying, not at her, but at the situation. "It is a command decision. I am condemning this apartment as unsafe. I own the insurance company that covers this block. I am declaring it a hazard." He was lying. He didn't own the insurance company for this specific block, probably. But he said it with enough authority that Susan hesitated. "I have a guest suite at the plaza," Robert said, softening his tone. "It is empty. It has heat. It has safe wiring. And it has room for a family. Just for tonight, Susan. Until I can get a safety inspector down here tomorrow to fix these wires. Please, do it for the children." Susan looked at Timmy. He was shivering slightly, despite the coat. She looked at Emily. Emily nodded slightly. Susan's shoulders slumped. The fight went out of her. She was too tired to argue with a billionaire. "Just for tonight," she whispered. "And I pay for the taxi." Robert smiled, a small, sad smile. "We can discuss the transportation logistics later. Get your things." As Susan went to the back room to pack, Robert looked at the photo of William Miller on the wall. The sergeant seemed to be looking back at him, judging him. "I'll fix this, Will," Robert thought. "I promise you. I'll make it right." But Robert didn't know yet that the wiring wasn't the only thing broken in Susan's life. And he didn't know that by taking them out of this basement, he was about to unleash a storm of gossip and trouble that would threaten everything he had built. The ride to Sullivan Plaza was silent. The city lights blurred past the windows of the luxury sedan, streaks of gold and red against the dark glass. Inside, the car was a sanctuary of quiet warmth. The heated leather seats seemed to hug the frozen children. Susan sat in the front passenger seat. She sat stiffly, her hands clutching her purse in her lap. She did not lean back. She stared straight ahead, her jaw set tight. She was a woman entering enemy territory, or so she felt. This was her boss's car. This was a line that should not be crossed. In the back, Timmy was already asleep. The heat and the full stomach had knocked him out. Emily sat awake, her eyes moving from the back of her mother's head to the man driving. Robert drove with easy confidence. He didn't have a chauffeur tonight. He liked to drive himself when he needed to think. And tonight, his mind was racing. "We are here," Robert announced softly as he pulled up to the curb. He didn't pull into the underground garage where the staff entered. He pulled right up to the grand front entrance. The doorman, a man named Henry, who had worked there for 20 years, stepped out briskly. Henry opened the door. "Good evening, Mr. Sullivan. I didn't expect you back, so—" Henry stopped. He saw the woman in the cleaning uniform in the front seat. He saw the sleeping boy and the girl in the worn denim jacket in the back. "Henry," Robert said, stepping out and buttoning his coat. "Please park the car. These are my guests." "Guests, sir?" Henry blinked, regaining his composure. "Of course. Right away." Susan stepped out. She looked small against the towering glass facade of the building she cleaned every day. Usually, she entered through the service door in the alley. She punched a clock next to the dumpsters. Tonight, she was walking on the red carpet. "I can carry him," Susan said, reaching for the sleeping Timmy. "I have him," Robert said. He reached into the back and lifted the 7-year-old with surprising strength for a man of 70. Timmy stirred but didn't wake. He just rested his head on Robert's expensive cashmere coat. "Come," Robert said. They walked through the lobby. It was a cavern of marble and gold. Susan usually saw this floor at 2 a.m. when she was buffing the stone. Seeing it now, with the chandeliers fully lit, she felt dizzy. They took the private elevator. The numbers climbed higher and higher. 10, 20, 40, 60. "My ears popped," Emily whispered. "Swallow hard," Robert advised kindly. "It helps." The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. If the lobby was grand, this was a different world entirely. It was a world of vast, open space. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the entire city spread out like a glittering map. The furniture was modern, sleek, and sparse. It was beautiful, but it was cold. It looked like a museum, not a home. Robert carried Timmy to a plush sofa and laid him down gently. He took a throw blanket made of thick wool and covered the boy. "The guest wing is down that hall," Robert said, pointing to the left. "There are 3 bedrooms. Each has a bathroom. You will find fresh towels and robes." Susan stood in the center of the room. She hugged her arms around herself. She looked at the polished floors. She knew exactly which wax was used on them. She knew how hard it was to get scuff marks off this specific type of wood. "Mr. Sullivan," Susan said, her voice shaking slightly. "This is too much. We can't stay here. I'll call a cab. I can't be here." "Why?" Robert asked. He walked over to a small bar and poured a glass of water. He brought it to her. "Because I clean this place," Susan blurted out. The exhaustion was cracking her composure. "I clean your toilets, Mr. Sullivan. I empty your trash. I can't sleep in your guest room. It's not right. It confuses everything." Robert placed the glass of water in her hand. He looked her in the eye. "Susan, look at me." She looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. "You are not cleaning tonight," Robert said firmly. "Tonight, you are a mother who needs a safe roof for her children, and I am a man who has too much roof and not enough family. You are doing me a favor by filling these rooms. It is too quiet here." He turned to Emily, who was staring out the window at the city lights. "Emily, what do you see?" Robert asked. "Everything," she breathed. "It looks like stars, but on the ground." "It does," Robert agreed. "Perspectives change depending on where you stand. Sometimes you need to come up high to see where the paths lead. Your grandfather and we spent a lot of time in muddy trenches looking up at the sky. We promised ourselves that if we made it home, we wouldn't spend our lives in the mud. He looked back at Susan. Will Miller fought for a better life. Do not dishonor his fight by refusing a safe harbor when the storm hits. Susan lowered her head. The mention of her father always disarmed her. She took a sip of the water. Her hand was trembling. Okay, she whispered. Just for tonight, because of the wiring. Good, Robert said. Now I imagine you are hungry. Real food, not just soup. We're okay. Susan started to protest automatically. I am not, Robert said. And I hate eating alone. I'm going to make sandwiches, grilled cheese. It is the only thing I know how to cook without burning the building down. A small, genuine smile touched Emily's lips. You can cook? I can melt cheese on bread, Robert corrected. Come on, I need a sous chef. 30 minutes later, the atmosphere had shifted. The kitchen was a marvel of stainless steel and granite, but it smelled like butter and toasted bread. They sat at the kitchen island, not the formal dining table. Timmy had woken up, smelled the food, and wandered in, sleepy but hungry. They ate grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, but this soup was from a gourmet pouch Robert found in the pantry, rich and creamy. Susan ate slowly. With every bite, her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. The warmth of the room, the safety, the food, it was seducing her defenses. So, Robert said, wiping a crumb from his lip, I want to talk about the red ink Emily mentioned. Susan froze. She shot a look at Emily. Emily looked down at her plate. Don't look at her, Robert said gently. She is a good soldier. She reported the situation accurately. You have medical debt. Susan sighed. She put down her sandwich. My father's cancer. The insurance hit a cap. The treatments were experimental. We tried everything. How much? Robert asked. 40,000, Susan said. The number hung in the air like a lead weight. I pay 200 a month. The interest eats most of it. I'll be paying it until I'm 80. And the rent? I'm behind, she admitted. 2 months. The landlord said if I don't pay by Friday, he changes the locks. That's why I was picking up the extra shifts. That's why... She stopped. Her voice caught. That's why I couldn't buy the cake. I had the money in my hand this morning, but the landlord called. He wanted a good faith payment. I gave it to him. I had to choose between a roof and a cake. Tears welled up in her eyes again. I felt like such a failure. A mother should never have to look at her child and say no to a birthday cake. Robert reached across the island. He placed his hand over hers. His hand was weathered, spotted with age, but strong. You chose the roof, Robert said. That is not failure, Susan. That is survival. That is command. You protected your unit. I'm tired, Mr. Sullivan, she whispered. The admission came out like a broken dam. I am so tired. I know, Robert said. I know. Timmy finished his sandwich and yawned loudly. Can we watch TV? The screen is as big as a movie. Maybe for 10 minutes, Robert said. Emily, show him the remote. It's on the coffee table. The kids ran into the living room. The sound of a cartoon filled the vast silence of the penthouse. Susan stood up to clear the plates. I'll wash these. Leave them, Robert ordered. The housekeeper comes in the morning. I am the housekeeper, Susan said, a reflex. She reached for a plate. Then it happened. As she reached for the plate, Susan swayed. Her face went gray. The plate slipped from her fingers and shattered on the tile floor. Susan? Robert stood up quickly. She blinked, looking confused. I feel dizzy. The room is spinning. She took a step back, trying to find the counter for support, but she missed. Her knees buckled. Mom! Emily screamed from the living room. Robert moved faster than he had in 20 years. He caught her just before she hit the floor. She was light, alarmingly light. He realized beneath the bulky coat she was frail. She had been skipping meals to feed her kids. He lowered her to the ground, kneeling beside her. Susan? Can you hear me? Her eyes were fluttering. Her skin was clammy and cold. My chest, she gasped. It hurts. Hard to breathe. Emily, Robert barked. Bring me the phone, now! Emily ran in, her face pale with terror. Timmy was standing in the doorway, crying. Robert grabbed the phone. He didn't call 911. He dialed a private number. Dr. Aris, Robert said into the phone, his voice commanding and sharp. This is Robert Sullivan. I have a medical emergency at the penthouse. Female, late 30s. Signs of extreme exhaustion, malnutrition, possible cardiac stress. Get here, now, and bring the portable unit. He hung up. He looked at Emily. Emily, listen to me, Robert said. He was calm. He was the sergeant now. Take Timmy into the guest room. Turn on the TV loud. Close the door. Is she dying? Emily sobbed. Is she going to be like Grandpa? No, Robert said fiercely. Not on my watch. She has just crashed. Her engine ran out of fuel. But I need you to take care of your brother so I can take care of your mother. Can you do that? Emily wiped her eyes. She nodded. She grabbed Timmy's hand. Come on, Timmy. Let's go watch the movie. She dragged the crying boy down the hall and closed the door. Robert turned back to Susan. She was conscious, but barely. He loosened the collar of her uniform. He took her hand. Hold on, Susan, he whispered. Help is coming. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. You can let go. I've got you. Susan looked up at him. Her eyes were filled with fear, not for herself, but for what would happen next. The kids, she wheezed. If I go to the hospital, social services, they'll take them. No, Robert promised. They won't touch them. You are in my house. You are under my protection. Nobody takes them. I swear it on the silver star. Susan's eyes closed. Her breathing was shallow. Robert sat on the kitchen floor of his billion-dollar penthouse, holding the hand of his cleaning lady, waiting for the elevator to ding. He looked at the shattered pieces of the plate on the floor. He realized he had been wrong earlier. He hadn't just been ignoring the people who worked for him. He had been ignoring the reality of the world he helped build. A world where a woman works herself to death for a cake and a cold basement. The elevator dinged. The storm had arrived. And Robert knew that when the sun came up, nothing could go back to the way it was before. He was done being an observer. It was time to go back to war. The private wing of St. Jude's Hospital was quiet. It smelled of lavender and antiseptic, a sharp contrast to the damp earth smell of the basement apartment. Susan lay in a bed with crisp white sheets. An IV line ran into her arm, delivering fluids and vitamins. She was asleep, her face peaceful for the first time in years. The deep lines of worry around her eyes seemed to have smoothed out. Robert stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot below. It was 3 a.m. He hadn't slept. The door opened softly. Dr. Aris stepped in, holding a clipboard. She is stable, the doctor said, keeping his voice low. It was exactly what you thought. Extreme exhaustion, dehydration, and stress-induced arrhythmia. She has been running on fumes, Robert. Another week of this, and her heart might have just stopped. Robert nodded slowly. He felt a cold weight in his stomach. She was working in my building, he said, more to himself than the doctor. She was collapsing right under my feet, and I was worried about stock prices. You are fixing it now, Aris said. She needs rest. Real rest. Not just a weekend off. She needs months to rebuild her reserves. She will get it, Robert promised. And the children? They are asleep in the waiting room suite. I didn't want to send them away. Dr. Aris patted Robert on the shoulder. You did a good thing tonight. Most people would have just called an ambulance and walked away. I didn't do a good thing, Robert corrected him grimly. I did a necessary thing. There is a difference. The next morning, the sun rose cold and bright. Robert had his assistant bring fresh clothes for the children and Susan. He also made 2 phone calls. At 9 a.m., a man named Mr. Henderson arrived at the hospital waiting room. Henderson was the regional manager for the cleaning contractor that serviced Sullivan Plaza. He looked nervous, clutching his briefcase like a shield. "Mr. Sullivan," Henderson stammered, "I came as soon as you called. Is there a problem with the contract?" Robert sat in a leather chair, still wearing his clothes from the night before. He looked tired, but his eyes were dangerous. "Sit down, Henderson." Henderson sat. "I have an employee of yours in that room." Robert pointed to Susan's door. "Susan Miller. Do you know her?" I believe I've seen the name on the roster. Level 4 sanitation?" "She collapsed last night from malnutrition and exhaustion," Robert said calmly. "She was working double shifts because she was terrified of losing her job. She told me that her supervisor threatened to replace her if she asked for time off to take her sick child to the doctor." Henderson paled. "Sir, I assure you, that is not our company policy." "It is your culture," Robert snapped. "And it happens in my building. That makes it my problem." Robert leaned forward. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to fire that supervisor today. And then, you are going to rewrite your entire HR policy regarding sick leave and wages for the staff in my buildings. If you don't, I cancel the contract, and I will make sure every other building owner in this city knows why." That will cost us a fortune," Henderson squeaked. "It will cost you less than losing my business," Robert said. "Fix it, or get out." Henderson scrambled to his feet and left, sweating. Next, Robert picked up his phone. He dialed the number Emily had given him for the landlord. "Hello?" a gruff voice answered. "This is Robert Sullivan's attorney," Robert lied smoothly. "I am representing Ms. Susan Miller regarding the property at 42 Oak Street." The line went silent. "We are sending a building inspector to the unit today," Robert continued. "If he finds a single code violation, like, say, faulty wiring, we will be suing for endangerment. Unless, of course, you would like to release Ms. Miller from her lease immediately, return her deposit, and waive all back rent." "Take the lease," the landlord grunted and hung up. Robert put the phone down. The battles were won. Now came the hard part, the peace talks. Susan woke up around noon. The sunlight was streaming across her bed. She blinked, confused, until she saw Emily and Timmy sitting in chairs by the wall, watching cartoons on a tablet with the sound off. "Mom!" Timmy whispered loudly. He ran over and hugged her carefully. "Hey, baby," Susan rasped. She felt weak, but clear-headed. She looked up and saw Robert standing in the doorway. "The doctor says you are going to live," Robert said, entering the room. "But you are grounded." Susan tried to sit up. "Mr. Sullivan, the work, my shift, is covered," Robert said. "Indefinitely. You are on paid medical leave." "I don't have paid medical leave," Susan said, confused. "You do now. I had a chat with your management." Robert pulled a chair close to the bed. "Susan, we need to settle something. Last night you said your father was stubborn, that he wouldn't take a handout, and you are the same." "Ideally, yes," Susan said, her pride flaring up even in a hospital gown. "Good, because I am not offering a handout. I am paying a debt." Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, worn photograph. It was black and white, creased down the middle. It showed a group of soldiers sitting on a tank, eating from tin cans. He pointed to a man in the center, laughing, with a cigarette behind his ear. "That's my dad," Susan whispered. "That's Will." "And that," Robert pointed to a skinny, scared-looking boy next to him, "is me." Susan looked closer. The boy in the photo looked nothing like the billionaire standing before her. He looked hungry and terrified. "I was the youngest private in the squad," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "I told the kids a story last night about a peach tin, about how Will fed the youngest first. That was me, Susan. I was the one he fed." Tears filled Robert's eyes. He didn't wipe them away. "Your father saved my life 3 times. Once in the Ardennes, once in Berlin, and once when we got home and I couldn't find a job. He gave me $50 to buy a suit so I could go to an interview. That interview got me my start in shipping. Robert looked at Susan, his expression pleading. Everything I have, the towers, the money, the cars, it started with your father's $50. I tried to find him years ago, to pay him back. But I looked for William Miller. Do you know how many William Millers are in the directory? Thousands. I never knew he had passed. I never knew he had a daughter. Susan was crying now, silent tears running down her cheeks. Emily was listening intently, holding Timmy's hand. So you see, Robert said, leaning back, this isn't charity. This is a return on an investment. Your father invested in me when I was nothing. Now, the investment has matured. I am simply paying the dividend to his shareholders. To you, to Emily, to Timmy. A dividend? Susan asked, a small smile breaking through her tears. A very large one, Robert smiled. I am setting up a trust for the children's education. And for you, I have a proposition. I need someone to manage the charitable arm of my company. Someone who knows what it's like to struggle. Someone who knows the value of $1 and a loaf of bread. I don't need a polished executive. I need a fighter. I need a Miller. You want to hire me? I want to partner with you. The salary is substantial. The hours are reasonable. And you will never scrub a floor again unless you want to. Susan looked at her hands that were red and rough from chemicals. She looked at Emily, who was nodding vigorously. She looked at Timmy, who just wanted his mom to be happy. I don't know what to say, Susan whispered. Say yes, sir, Robert suggested gently. Like a good soldier. Susan laughed, a real full laugh. Yes, sir. 6 months later, the sign above the renovated brick building read, The Iron Will Foundation. It was the same building where Susan used to live in the damp basement. Now, Robert owned the entire property. The upper floors were converted into affordable apartments for single mothers, and the ground floor was a community kitchen and support center. On this Sunday morning, the line outside wasn't heavy with shame. It was light with chatter. Inside, the air smelled of fresh vanilla and yeast. Susan moved through the crowd, vibrant and healthy in a smart blazer. She checked her clipboard and directed a mother to the back room where winter coats were being distributed. Her smile was brighter than it had ever been. At the serving counter, Emily was in charge. She stood taller now, her blonde hair tied back. Chocolate or vanilla? Emily asked a shy little girl. Vanilla, the girl whispered. Good choice. It has a rocket ship on it, Emily said with a wink, handing over the box. Behind the counter, wearing a white apron over his charcoal suit, was Robert Sullivan. He was scooping potato salad with the same intense focus he once used for corporate board meetings. He looked happier than he had ever appeared on the cover of any business magazine. Timmy ran between the tables filling water glasses, wearing a t-shirt that read, Junior Captain. The bell above the door chimed. A young woman walked in holding a baby. She looked tired, her clothes worn and thin. She hesitated near the entrance, looking at the food and then turning to leave. Robert put down his spoon and walked out from behind the counter. Excuse me, miss, he called out. The woman froze. I don't have a voucher. I made a mistake. You don't need a voucher here, Robert said gently, guiding her toward a warm table. You just need an appetite. Is it a birthday? The woman looked down at her baby. No, just a Tuesday, a hard Tuesday. Those are the days that need cake the most, Robert smiled. Sit down. My friend Susan will bring a high chair and I will get you a hot meal. Susan arrived with coffee and Emily brought a cupcake for the baby. The woman wiped a tear from her cheek. Why? She asked. Why do you do this? Robert looked at the wall. Hanging there, in a place of honor, was the Silver Star medal next to the old photo of the soldiers on the tank. Because nobody fights alone, Robert said softly. Not anymore. Outside, The sun broke through the clouds, shining on the new sign. The billionaire, the maid, and the children had found something worth more than all the money in the bank. They had found a family. And in saving them, Robert realized, they had saved him right back. And that's where we'll leave Robert and the family for now, proving that sometimes the smallest gifts matter the most. I hope this story of unexpected kindness gave you a chance to step out of your own daily rush and just drift for a bit. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Maybe you were having a cup of tea, or perhaps winding down after your own long day of work. Drop a line in the comments. I really do read them all. If you want to make sure we cross paths again for more heartwarming tales, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We are always trying to improve our storytelling, so feel free to drop your feedback below. Thank you for being part of this story today.